Assalamu alaikum again. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining. This is the third installation of today's emergency think tank Hawza for the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And we just finished the last video call with an interesting highlight. I thought that if we kind of piggyback on what Brother Hassan was bringing as a vision of brotherly love between Israelis and Palestinians, as crazy as that may sound now, or let's say as unlikely as it may sound, in the end, it may be the only solution, because on the one hand, in today's current context, clearly geostrategically, the Muslims are losing on every field. Okay, we're losing militarily, we're losing economically, we're losing in terms of media, we're losing in terms of politics, we're losing in diplomacy. You cannot really identify an issue where the Muslims are winning anything in this debate if you want to look at it as a win-win or a zero-sum game, as they say. There's not really any way to identify any kind of win. So pursuing a zero-sum game approach may not be the best interests of the Muslim community, if you'd like to call it that. On the other hand, it may also not be in interest of the Zionist polity, because as we were just discussing, the Zionist entity itself depends extremely heavily, if not fundamentally, on the North American and European supporters that they've had in the last 50, 60, 70 years, since basically the end of the Second World War and the Holocaust and the Russian pogroms, because on the one hand of the sympathy generated by the situation, of course, on the other hand, of course, because quite simply, it was a convenient solution for the Europeans and the North Americans to get rid of the Jews, right? And in another, which certainly was a reason why the colonialists agreed to the solution and to support the solution. And thirdly, simply because it allows a certain amount of North American and European influence in the region without having to pay very much for it, because the Jews will finance it themselves without that being any kind of a financial jab at the Jews. Yeah, it's simply true. Yeah. So neither side, if you look at the situation the way it is now, neither side, in my viewpoint, neither side strategically really has a long-term interest in a zero-sum game approach to this issue. Okay. The Jewish polity cannot exist long-term without a peaceful neighborhood of the Arabs. It can't, because the numbers are just too overwhelming. We talked about numbers in the last link. The numbers are simply overwhelming. It cannot be done for a period of more than a generation, maybe 10 years. And on the other hand, as mentioned, Ummah is always a nice thing that Muslims like to talk about. At the tea session after the Jummah, we like to sit down and philosophize about the Ummah, but we all know there's not really an Ummah, because the Sunni Shia divide is an issue, the Arab non-Arab divide is an issue, the cultural issues that divide us are just enormous. The historical antipathies, for example, between the Ottomans and the Safavids lead to a Turkish-Persian situation now that could be much better than what it is. We could have a very strong sphere of influence if the Turks and the Persians would actually get along, yeah, but they don't fundamentally. And so there are just some flaws in the structure that we'd like to call the Ummah, that we like to romantically philosophize about over the tea while we talk about the Ummah after the Friday prayers, that keep us from really taking advantage of a numbers game. Yeah, so there's no real, in my current viewpoint, and I'm happy to hear other opinions, but I don't see how a zero-sum game is really going to be an advantage for anyone. Certainly not for the Palestinians, who are losing wholehandedly. Okay, so having said that, that's pretty much I'll take Hassan's vision and piggyback on it as my own. So I'll share it rather than having put forth what I had actually prepared. So, so good for you, Hassan. But now the question, of course, is how to get there strategically. We talked about education. We talked about cultural environment. We talked about the fundamental roots of the right of a Jewish polity to exist, number one, at all, and number two, in the region. And whether we would support a Zionist polity as Muslims, okay, at all, okay, and particularly in that region, yeah. And as I said in the last call, I'm kind of agnostic about it. I'm not sure yet, because on the one hand, I don't like the idea of a state nowadays being based on ethnicity. I think we learned our lessons from the Second World War, hopefully, and I think we learned that that we don't want that. We don't want a purely homogenous, driven ethnic state. I think we've identified in the last call that the Jewish are not really ethnicity, as they might say, because you have Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Ethiopian Jews. Brecht was mentioning all of the different kinds of Jews that there are, apart from, of course, their cultural backgrounds and even their biological genetic differences, yeah, which have led to strife in the Jewish homeland previously. So clearly there's a lot to unpack there, but without maybe one thing we can agree on, and I think this is very important to take a first strategic step, and I'm interested in your opinions about this. Maybe we can concede that only the Jews, in their own consensus and in their own, according to their own theology, and in whatever democratic or non-democratic process they might decide amongst themselves, but only the Jews can decide whether or not the right to a Jewish state is a theological principle or not. I don't know if we can agree to that as a first step of reconciliation, as abstract as that sounds, but maybe we can agree to that, as long as we're not, of course, under the fundamental condition that we're not suffering from it, okay? Under the fundamental condition that no human being has to suffer from that. In other words, if I give them, again, it's a joke, okay? If I give them Schleswig-Holstein, as this guy, this Jewish guy here in Germany said some years ago, he wrote the funny book. Well, it could have been done after the Second World War, right? It wasn't done. And we see the mess. To say it in another funny way, if I were to give them Antarctica, yeah? Okay. Any objections?
I don't necessarily have let's say, a theological objection in that regards to or let's say a fundamental objection to the idea that it is up to the Jewish community in the end to decide on the feasibility, on the possibility, and the permissibility of a Jewish state, because interestingly, that is a discussion apparently that exists within the Jewish community.
Oh, it definitely is. Yes.
One of the most radical opponents of Israel in the world is a Jewish organization called Neturei Karta, who believes that even theoretically speaking, even if the land had been completely empty, they are forbidden by God from having a Jewish state, right? So that is and these people are Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews, right? So they have their religious reason, their theological arguments, no doubt, which I believe are based in either the Torah or the Talmud. I am not an expert in that regard, but in the end, of course, whether or not they decide on the permissibility of this is up to them, of course. In a theoretical, within a theoretical cadre. I'm not talking about a state, a Jewish state in Palestine. Let that be clear. I'm talking about if the possibility of a Jewish state could be there religiously. That is something that the Jews can indeed discuss among themselves and agree upon amongst themselves. Yeah.
Right. Right, and I think I'm just taking a note of that because I think it's a very interesting question and answer. I will be summarizing this, by the way, also in some notes, so it won't just be the videos that are posted, but I've been taking some notes the whole time, and I'll kind of try to refine those and post those in the chat then along with our videos, of course. Yeah, so we're all informed of where we are. But I think if we are two, and I don't know if Hassan agrees with that. Can we get a unanimous consensus of the Muslim Ummah in this call to?
I'm not aware of Jewish theology, and maybe I guess that on the Muslim side, it is possible that, let's say, some traditions or scholars can argue that Jerusalem is also holy for us because that's the place from where started the heavenly journey, Mi'raj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But at least without any disagreement, we can say that Mecca, where is the Kaaba, and Medina, where is the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are primary sacred places for us. And let's say in this regard, Jerusalem is somehow secondary importance to us.
Okay. Okay, I think that's an important, let's say, indication. So we'll take that with us. Both the children of Israel and the Muslims can theologically claim Jerusalem as a and I want to phrase this very carefully, because I think the wording is, unfortunately, the devil is in the details. So I think it's very important how we phrase this, and I want to toss out a phrase, and I want to see if you guys can agree with that. Can we agree that both the children of Israel and the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah, can theoretically justify Jerusalem as a principal holy city for their respective religion? Can they, not must they?
I think that specifically, I think we can agree, of course, on the sanctity of Jerusalem in both religions. And well, of course, we don't have to agree on the Jewish scriptures as they exist nowadays to understand the fact that the Jews believe in those scriptures and such believe that they are that there are holy places in Jerusalem for them. But one matter in terms of the devil in the details, can we refer to the Jews as Jews, or would you prefer to refer them as the children of Israel? Because I'm afraid that might cause confusion with the Banu Israel as an ethnicity. And
I know. It's really delicate. I don't like to say Jews because sometimes to say,
yeah,
the Jews do that. You know, I don't like how that sounds. So I don't like to say the Jews. I really dislike to say it. It doesn't taste good in my mouth. So I prefer to say the children of Israel and take it from a theological standpoint of what the Quran actually talks about. Because the Quran doesn't, well, there are some sections that say Yahudi, but sometimes they're actually in favor of the Yahudi. It's not always against. So that's also not, it's not fully settled theologically, certainly in the Ummah.
Okay, if we use it from a purely theological point of view as meaning the Jews in a different term, then I have no problem with it. I just wanted to clarify that.
I understand your request. So I would have said Bani Israel. You know what I mean? That's the notion I would have used for this debate, because I actually met, unbelievably, I met a Samaritan once.
Samaritan, right? Yeah.
Samaritan, thank you. And it was quite funny. Oh, you're a Samaritan, really? I didn't know there were any. And we had
left, right? Yeah.
Not at all. And the guy was very interesting, and he was just criticizing the Jews up and down, and he was actually really upset with the whole situation, because he was saying he was from the Zionist entity of Israel, and he was saying, how am I going to have a state in 20 years if the Jews keep doing what they're doing? Yeah, so he was very upset with the Jews as a Samaritan. Yeah,
sanctuary is near Nablus, right? Their holy place is on Mount Gerizim in the West Bank. They
Exactly.
don't believe in
So
the existence of the temple.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's even amongst the children of Israel there are debates, and certainly there's a lot of color for debates. And one very interesting North American group called J Street. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're kind of the counterbalance to AIPAC, which is the big Zionist lobby of the Jews in the United States, and the kind of the youthful kind of counterpart to that. Which firmly believes in a two-state solution. And I know that because I've been following them on Facebook, and I've been watching their videos and their posts, and they firmly commit to a two-state solution, which for a Jewish political group is saying a lot, okay? Because AIPAC, if you look at what AIPAC are doing, they're simply, they can't wait to get their hands on the rest of the West Bank and Gaza, basically. And they don't understand fundamentally the long-term damage that they're doing to their own people. They're just too unbalanced from what's happened in the Holocaust and all of that. So unfortunately, and it's understandable. But so to pick that up again, so the question is that if both sides consider Jerusalem to be holy, to be somehow a holy sanctuary, can we share it? And if so, how? If not, it's easy to say, then it becomes a zero-sum game again. And and if we take the position that we cannot assume a zero-sum game as a strategic approach for either side, certainly not as a moral approach for other side, then can we share it? In other words, what, how, and if so, how? And I don't think we really have too much time to answer that now. So I think we have enough kind of heavyweight stuff that we talked about. And we only have a few minutes left in this call. It's going to be 4 o'clock pretty soon. So I'd like to not forget the operational part and ask everybody for what we've just discussed in a short, under 59 seconds, tell us operationally what you'd like to do as a step toward this solution. So Hassan, maybe we can start with you. And if you have 5 ideas that you'd like to do and you only want to tell us one because this is being recorded, I fully understand that. Just tell us what you can. Okay.
I have almost nothing to say, and I also may sound very naive, but I would agree with what have said. I think it was one of the European Muslim scholars who traveled, Abdul Hakim Murad, if I'm not mistaken. He's in Britain, his name. In one of his traveling to Palestine, and asking the people, one of the people there, what can we do? And the answer was, everyone is asking what we can do. And I will advise you, first of all, take care about your affairs. Well, become a strong community wherever you are. If you are in the UK, become good Muslims and good community there. And in Europe or in Bulgaria, when you become strong as a community wherever you are, then you will be able to help more efficiently.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's I'm taking it with me. I'm taking it with me. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Next, Recht.
Yeah, basically, indeed, to continue on that, the most important thing that we can do operationally, more practically speaking, is we have to keep on the pressure, not just the pressure on the Zionists in Israel, but pressure on our own governments and our own society to reach out and to educate people about what is happening, what is going on, and why that is unjust. And interestingly, that this is we're living in historical times now, because indeed, as you said, the rather ill-advised, rash, brazen actions by the Zionists have ruined a lot of the carefully cultivated image. I know I live in a city with a few thousand inhabitants, or a few 10,000 inhabitants, not very large, but even here, we'll have a Palestine rally taking place later this week, right, in several other little cities as well. And these are rallies that for a big part are organized and attended, right, by people who are not Muslim. So right, we have, as a Muslim community, we can tell people this is not just an Islamic, this is not just about Muslims, this is not about Muslims versus Jews. This is about colonized people versus the colonizers, and we have to educate and reach out and keep up the pressure, comparable to how our ancestors in the 1980s and the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s kept up the pressure against apartheid South Africa, until the system eventually was forced to concede and collapse on its own without the need for civil war. So this is something that I think we have to keep on pressuring for, and do our part in that way. Reach out, organize, mobilize, up until victory.
Perfect. Versus colonized, as opposed to Muslim versus Jew. I think that's a great point. Great point. Similar to breakdown of apartheid state. And in fact, I think that's, look, if nothing happens, I think that's the way it's going to go anyway, to be honest, because of what we just discussed, the shifting of demographics and opinions, both in North America and Europe, and therefore the crumbling of lobbyist support in future generations of politics for this Zionist polity. So I think it's going to go in that direction eventually anyway. So hopefully, inshallah, the good news is on our side. And my operational step is, I think, pretty obvious and blunt. It's to create these kind of forums and atmospheres, and keep working on the academy and provide these kind of multimedia think tank strategic environments for Muslims to be able to discuss and analyze the problems that face our ummah on a high level on a regular basis, so that we're not just confronted with newspapers and Instagram posts and things of that nature, but we actually start to coordinate over geographic boundaries and create the brain pools to take strategic approaches and make things happen in the future. So that's my little approach. Okay. So would anyone like to leave any last discussions or minutes or anything?
No.
Before we close, because we're getting very close to 4 o'clock, and I think it's a good cutoff for all of us. So if nothing left, I'd like to say thank you very much to both of you, Hassan and Brecht, for taking part in this very interesting Hawza. Hopefully it'll be the first of a series. I'm thinking about putting together a series of kind of think tank Hawzas for every once in a while. It won't be too often, maybe once per quarter, and seeing if we can start to pool some of the brain power. And I think at least I've learned really a lot from you guys, and I hope that you've learned maybe 1 or 2 things from each other as well. And I really appreciate this discussion very much. And I hope it's a first step toward realizing this opportunity that we have like never before to communicate across global and international boundaries, and as Muslims act strategically rather than ad hoc. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good time for Muslims to do that in this world today, inshallah. So thank you very much. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.